The BMW 1 Series entered its second generation in 2012, with production beginning at the end of 2011, after the original had proven a hit with customers, spawning a coupe and M model. The second generation 1 Series was to be built on the BMW L7 platform and coded F20, sharing many aspects with the coupe and convertible 2 Series F22 and F23 generation that this guide can also be applied to. This split of 1 and 2 Series separates the body styles. For lovers of two-door hatchbacks, the second generation was sold in this configuration. However, by 2018, BMW, along with most automakers, would begin their turn on the iconic 3-door hatchback design to streamline production to the 5-door model only. The F20 generation ended production in 2019 to make way for the F40 generation 1 Series, which switched to front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive configurations. That last aspect has cemented this generation as a future classic in the fastest specification, as not only was it the last 3-door hatchback from the brand, but the last rear-drive hatchback, although technically I suppose that last bit actually goes to the BMW i3 that kept rear drive in its hatchback until it ended production in 2021. For the BMW aficionados out there, the 3-door hatch is coded F21, setting it apart. Although there are a wide range of badges, there are actually quite a small selection of engines. I'll come on to the engines later in the guide, but the lowest trim was the 114i, but for most of you the petrol choice is the 116i, 118i, 120i, 125i, and then the M badged but not full M models of M135i, which was later replaced by the M140i. That last one is a favourite in the tuning scene thanks to its engine share with many BMWs, including the BMW Z4 and then the Toyota Supra. In the diesel range, again there is a 114D offered in some markets, but for most it's a 116D, 118D, 120D and a 125D. There is no 1M replacement for the 1 Series, instead it becomes the M2, of which there's already a guide to check out on the channel after this video. Now don't worry if you've clicked on this video looking for the 2 Series, because a lot of the issues that are on the 1 Series do cross over to the 2 Series. It's just the 2 Series arrives in 2014-2015, so it will share a lot more with the Facelift 1 Series, actually has the face from the 1 Series model. A couple of things to note on the 2 Series, it achieves a 50-50 weight distribution, and all 2 Series models are Euro 6 compliant. So if you buy one, it's 2014, you should be able to get it recognised as a Euro 6 car, even if it's not showing on its registration. That way you can go into low emission zones if you have those limitations in your country. But if you're just looking at things about sort of reliability and stuff like that, throughout the video, if it's something that is specific to a 2011 to 2014 1 Series, I'll mention it. So that way you know what's 2 Series and what's 1 Series. The Facelift, or LCI, arrives in 2015, although it will be later in the year for most markets, as the Facelift was only shown to the world in March that year at the Geneva Motor Show. A range of changes were made, most obvious are the front and rear lights, bumpers and boot lid, but the changes under the skin are more noteworthy. The lower powered diesel becomes a 3-cylinder, and the ultimate version of the 1 Series at the time, the M135i, gets a small power increase. I should also note that the introduction of the 120i and 125i model, that in 2015 has an N47 engine, which is quickly swapped out for the B58 engine in 2016. This isn't the only change, and it appears that the facelift happens across 2 years across the range, likely due to several updates in the engines across the BMW range, not quite ready in 2015. The M135i model is dropped in 2016 after its power increase in 2015. The M140i model is introduced in its place. I'll also note that in 2017 a wide array of interior updates arrive, including a change to the instrument binnacle, which loses its physical needle, along with a redesign of the air vents, glove compartment door, dash panel design, and newer interface with new iDrive. Altogether, these were quite a large change to a car that had only 2 years of production left, and were out of step with the usual launch, LCI and run-out phase of model planning. M Sport trim in the interior gets some additional touches. Now I wanted to step in here and just mention that some markets do have a slight delay in delivery times, so you can use the dates I've given as a general guide, but if they're slightly behind in your market, no big deal, just means that deliveries took slightly longer to get to you where you are. Moving on to safety, and the 1 Series achieved a full 5 stars at Euro NCAP with a 91% score for adult occupancy, although this scoring has now expired. The 2 Series achieved the green good marker in North American IIHS testing, the highest they mark in a category, although the headlights scored marginal, and in overall test the structure achieved the second highest rating behind good of acceptable. Moving on to the common faults, and a reminder to add a like to the video if you're finding it useful, as this helps it spread to people like yourself, and consider subscribing or becoming a channel member for more from the miles driven. The first one won't surprise BMW owners. It's a faulty window caused by a failed window regulator. Fortunately, this is a DIY job for those that enjoy doing the less technical jobs at home, as a new part is needed and simply replaced, but a specialist will be familiar, so it's worth getting the windows up and down when viewing a potential purchase and bargaining a repair into the sale price if they're starting to fail. Worn bushes, particularly around the wishbones and drop links, will not only cause cornering to be dull on test drive, but will likely be feathering the edges of the tyres or wearing them unevenly. If you're looking at an early 1 or 2 series with no history of these bushes being replaced, then budget for it to be done, and don't be surprised if a garage says the tyres ideally need to be changed on whichever axle is having the issue due to uneven wear. Keep this in mind when viewing, and if you think it needs the work, make sure you are comfortable with needing to spend more on top of whatever sale price you agree. If fitted with a sunroof, get a bright light across the roof material and check for any water spots. Fortunately, these weren't common, but were expensive if they were leaking. Another area to check is around the door seals. This was slightly more common, and you may see some water stains where a seal has broken or become brittle with age. If looking at one with a manual gearbox, listen out or try and feel for any clutch judder, particularly if there is no receipt for a replacement on higher mileage cars. Preferably view on a cold morning to be able to spot this. A clutch judder doesn't mean the clutch is at the very end of its life on the 1 Series, and several owners reported another 20,000 miles or 35,000 kilometers of use after they first noticed this, but it always eventually leads to a clutch replacement, and if it's on a car that you go to view, it may not have much time left. Generally speaking, autos have been fairly reliable, but owners report a fluid flush, done properly, can spring new life into the gearbox after around 100,000 miles or 160,000 kilometers. Any unexpected steering weight or steering wheel warning on the car's onboard computer will usually lead back to a faulty sensor. The electronic power steering relies on them, and they seem to get more and more reliable as the years roll by, so this is only normally reported as an issue on 2012 to 2015 models. One note though, if you feel a click on full lock, this is normal. This is the limit switch activating for the steering control. Coolant reservoirs, or coolant expansion tanks as you may know them, are fairly notorious failures across engines. Catch this early and you'll need a new tank and coolant flush and be back on the road. Catch it late and it could cause more damage, especially if it leaks and stops proper cooling of the engine. Sometimes this fault is actually the pipe leading into the coolant tank, so worth checking that first. Fault code 5DB1 will likely be a fault with the ABS reluctor ring. Fortunately, this is known to most specialists, so while it will take some time to fix, it shouldn't take too long to diagnose. Now, a quick tip, if you are looking at a 1 Series or 2 Series and you want to do some additional checking when you go to see a car, hold the trip reset button down and it'll open up a hidden menu. If you press it once when you go into the menu, you'll see that you can select 2 major things. One of them is vehicle identity and one of them is like a condition report. If you hold it down on vehicle identity, you'll get the vehicle identity number. That's a good check to do if you've checked the logbook that you've got or the registration document you've got. You've checked the chassis of the car and that matches. It's good to just check the binnacle as well. And in there, that should all match up so all those VIN numbers match. And that way, you know, it's not a stolen car or it's not had some weird sort of history with it being chopped and cut and things like that. The other thing to note in there is if you hold it down, you can go and through the diagnostics of the car. It is a basic diagnostic check. It's not something you're going to get with something like an OBD2 checker, but still worth having a look in there. So that's how you do that. You just hold it down on the trip and it will open up. If you want a better guide on that, just type in F20 1 Series hidden menu. There's some great videos on YouTube that will show you how to do that. I have to say that while there were a few common areas to check on the 1 Series, actually it performed fairly well with owners for reliability. Remember, a common fault is between 0.5 to 1% of cars built, but some of these things I've pointed out are more age and mileage dependent. However, the guide isn't exhaustive, so if you've owned one and know of something else that can help someone out, let them know of your experience and what to check. Next up are the recalls, and if you're thinking of the 3 Series of this age, good news, there is also a guide for the F33 series on the channel to check out after this video. In 2013, there was a recall for the vacuum pump on early 1 Series models built until 2013. A lack of lubrication could cause poor braking performance. In 2018, the 1 Series and 2 Series was given a staged recall for a global issue with Takata airbags. 2013 to 2017 cars were affected. Moisture could enter the airbag, risking fracture of the propeller upon the airbag firing. In 2023, a late recall was made for 2011 to 2012 1 Series models due to bolts on the camshaft timing risking snapping under campaign 0011520700. Next up are the engines, but a quick note that there are two gearboxes were offered. The first is a 6-speed manual Getrag. Although the M135 and M140 have its 6-speed from ZF, there was also an 8-speed ZF automatic offered across most models. A quick note that I'll be using the 1 Series naming terms for the engines like 118i, but this information will largely apply to the 2 Series, and so a 218i for example, throughout this selection. Let's start with the 1.6 litre N13 engine offered in the 114i, 116i, 118i and 120i until either 2015 or 2016 for the 120i. Power is rated at 101, 134, 168 and 175 brake horsepower. Official fuel economy is rated at 47.9 miles per gallon or 5.9 litres per 100 kilometres. These are shared technology with PSA, and a friend actually ran a 1 Series with this engine for 3 years. In that time, it required a second timing chain replacement and 4 auxiliary belts due to oil leaks that were never fixed. However, he wasn't lucky with the car, and I'd be surprised if that was replicated in many cases. Although timing chain and guide issues are not uncommon, and so worth looking for one that has had it replaced, any sign of an oil leak may be worth walking away from, as while it can be repaired, it can leak onto the auxiliary belt, causing it to slip or fail, which then stops the alternator working effectively and the battery running out of charge, an issue my friend faced. On the flip side, some owners have run these engines for 150,000 miles without too many issues. The key seems to be regular servicing and getting on top of any issue at the first sign. A big plus is they are fairly easy to work on for a modern engine design, so if you're confident with cars, these can be a bit of a bargain due to their reputation, but buy one knowing that you may have a lot of work ahead of you. The replacement for the N13 is the B38 3-cylinder 1.5 engine, although for many markets this comes on the Facelift and 114i model, and then the 114i model is dropped, so it is in the 116i and 118i. Power is rated at 107 brake horsepower and 134 brake horsepower, and official fuel economy is rated at 53.3 miles per gallon or 5.3 litres per 100 kilometres. For the most part, these engines have run fairly well with owners, although they will start to have a wide variety of problems if not properly maintained. The balancer shaft can fail and will make the engine very unbalanced. However, the 3-cylinder is a bit more notorious for engine vibrations anyway, so best to ask a specialist about this if you are unsure. A deeper dive didn't reveal too many complaints on this engine aside from it feeling a bit rough, especially if you've owned a 6-cylinder BMW and are moving to something more fuel efficient, but overall it's well regarded, and his updated mild hybrid version of the engine is now being sold on the brand new 1 Series. You can check out my drive in the new 1 Series 120 after the video for more on that one. The B48 2-litre turbo is fitted in the 120i and 125i from 2016, making 182 brake horsepower and 221 brake horsepower in most markets. Fuel economy is rated at 47.9 miles per gallon or 5.9 litres per 100 kilometres. Most owners have good things to say on the 2-litre B48. Most don't achieve the officially rated fuel economy, and servicing can be expensive on the larger interval services, but owners that have paid out for these and fixed any minor maintenance issues whenever their specialist has advised them report no major issues. For fun, I had a look at tuned example reliability, and even cars running more power seem to get over 100,000 miles or 160,000 kilometres on the factory turbocharger and don't report any common failure points. Although a few people that bought poorly serviced cars had faced larger bills for turbos and oil leaks, so check for good service records and you should be enjoying your new car purchase without worry. Then the N55 3-litre engine has a short run of 2012 to 2016 in the M135i, producing 315 brake horsepower, and then from 2015, 321 brake horsepower. Fuel economy is officially rated at 35.3 miles per gallon, or 8 litres per 100 kilometres. Here you enter a debate of N55 versus B58, and from driving both, I can see why both have its own following. The N55 drives much closer to a BMW everyone grew up to love. The turbos help power, but the torque is metered out over the rev range, encouraging a driver to push and get to the red line more so than from most turbocharged cars. If that sounds like what you want, then note that although rare, rod bearings do get reported as failing, and overall the engine prefers standard power for reliability. The vacuum lines and boost control solenoid can also fail along with the oil filter housing, but usually due to mileage or age rather than poor design. One note from a BMW technician: these need shorter servicing intervals than BMW advise. Ask your specialist what they find best for servicing and oil changes. The B58 in the M140i engine is a 3 litre, likely to go down as one of the legendary tuning engines of this generation of cars. Producing 335 brake horsepower for an average of 39.8 miles per gallon, or 7.1 litres per 100 kilometres, many owners found both these numbers to be off, with some dyno runs on early standard cars getting closer to 360 brake horsepower. BMW would later quote 370 brake horsepower on the Z4 M40i. But I can't say how many changes BMW made to officially changing the rating. What we do know is that this engine drives much more like a modern turbo. The reward for redline isn't as much as the N55, but the tuning potential is much higher. A standard one should be reliable for years as long as you keep on top of servicing, but even fairly low budget tuning seems to be getting over 450 brake horsepower fairly easily on the engine. But as expected, longevity will be affected the more aggressive you tune and the more power you look for. Drive a standard one first and you may find that the standard power is all you need, and note that the optional M exhaust can be quite loud if you're not someone that wants to be noticed when starting your car from cold on a winter morning. Then there are the diesels. The smallest is the 1.5 litre B37, which arrives in 2015 with the Facelift or LCI models. This is fitted to the 114D and 1160 with 96 and 115 brake horsepower, with an average of 53.3 miles per gallon or 5.3 litres per 100 kilometres. While this certainly won't be the enthusiast's choice, it is an economical unit and that so far has proven reliable. Although 3-cylinder engines are inherently less stable than 4 or 6-piston engines, at least for now they aren't having many complaints of longevity. It is also worth noting that thanks to thermal panels, all diesel engines warm up faster, helping limit DPF blocking and emissions equipment wear. So while some people will always want to avoid smaller engines, if you need fuel efficient transport, find a 116D with this engine and it's worth a test drive. Then we have the 2 litre, however there are two versions depending on age. Up to 2015 you'll have the N47 in the 118D, 120D and 125D, and in some countries this was also fitted to the 116D as a 1.6 variant, making 115 brake horsepower. Power is rated at 115, 141, 181 and 215 brake horsepower, and fuel economy varies slightly between the range, but the 118D has official figures of 64.2 miles per gallon or 4.4 litres per 100 kilometres on the older NEDC test cycle. Now the N47 diesel engine has a poor reputation for chain failures, taking the engine with them, and online forums are filled with people suggesting pedalling a Lilo into the North Sea would be preferable to owning one. However, the 1 Series is fitted with the revised version, and while this is certainly not perfect, it does perform much better in reliability scoring than the 2007 to 2010 iteration of the N47. Even better though is the 2013 revision, as 2 revisions are made to the N47. The one in 2011 to 2012 is generally reliable. The last in 2013 revision takes the engine to 2015 build on the earlier design, and looking through reports, owners have now run these to 200,000 miles without an issue. Although rare, the 125D was a genuinely quick car. Having driven one against a Golf GTD many years ago, the 125D left a lasting impression and is a great all-rounder. Finally though, we have the B47 2 litre fitted to the 2015 to 2016 model year cars. This goes in the 118D and 120D and then 125D, making 149, 188 and 222 brake horsepower, with average economy of 49.6 miles per gallon or 5.7 litres per 100 kilometres on the newer and stricter WLTP standard. Overall, people believe the B47 is the engine the brand should have built a decade ago. Powerful, reliable and efficient. 2 words of warning though, as overall most reviews are glowing about this engine. For starters, the emission equipment can and does fail, although this is usually after high mileage and is common on every modern diesel. Secondly, the first year of production did have some reports of timing chain issue. This is nowhere near as common as the early N47 engines, but if you have a 2015 or 2016 built car, it can be a good idea to have the timing chain replaced at around 80,000 miles for preventative maintenance. Aside from this, the 120D and 220D were solid favourites among lease and new car buyers, and so there is a good choice on the used market. Onto our picks, and the budget choice was a bit more difficult than it usually is, but on balance the 1160 with the newer B37 engine from 2015 onwards is both competitively priced and cheap to run. On the top end budget, drive an M140i or M220i and you'll likely never turn back. But if the BMW M2 is something that interests you, then why not check out that one next? But if you're thinking of a 3 Series instead, then you'll find the link to similar age 3 Series buyer's guide below. But if you love everything 1 Series, how about my review of the latest 120 next?